Hi everyone, it's Chris Lake with Buddy Star Tales from the Infinity Rainbow, coming at you here with another Friday night hangout chat. And happy weekend for everybody that has a weekend. I actually don't have a weekend this weekend. I'll be working Saturday, all day Saturday. And as I'm recording this, it's actually Thursday night. I'm getting this done a day ahead of time. That way I don't have to do it tomorrow night, so I can go to bed and get up early for my super early work shift with my day tech job. And so yeah, it's Thursday night here, but you'll be listening to this on Friday night. And just got a few things to discuss here. And while I do have an agenda planned out, I'm a plain person because if I don't have an agenda, I'll just freeze. I'm trying to keep this as informal as I can too. In last week's chat, I actually recorded 2 chats last week, and the one that ended up posting was one I did in my car over at the grocery store, where I just was able to just informally unload and unpack some things with you guys. So I'm gonna kind of try to do that here while also having a bit of an agenda, so I make sure I cover what I want to cover. And yeah, so first order of business before I forget, if anyone listening, watching this lives in Wisconsin or knows anyone that lives in Wisconsin, real quick, just get a pencil or a pen and paper, write this down somewhere to remember for November. There'll be some ballot initiative questions statewide on the election ballots in November for Wisconsin. And pretty much all of them are just bad ones that we need to vote no on. The legislature is controlled by Republicans, and they're the ones that are putting these forward. So until Democrats control the legislature, pretty much any ballot initiatives on a ballot in Wisconsin are going to be bad for democracy, bad for marginalized people. And the ones that they're trying to put through now, here's one that's an anti-DEI amendment to the Constitution, that the state constitution, that the way that's worded, it looks like it would be adding to the Constitution that discrimination against any race or ethnicity is unlawful. But since it's the Republicans doing it and it's only white men staying up behind this thing, it's another one of those wolf in sheep's clothing where likely it would be, I'm not entirely sure what it would do, but I know it's bad. It would probably just be enshrining non-discrimination protection, so to speak, for white males, which is ridiculous. So we need to vote no on that. And there's another one I saw about grooming, so-called grooming. That's just they're attacking LGBTQ people with that one. So we need to vote no on that. Any ballot initiatives, like I said, vote no. If you live in Wisconsin or know anyone that lives in Wisconsin, make sure to let them know that when they see ballot questions in November, just vote no on all of those. Statewide ballot for updating the state constitution. I posted a thing about, or I submitted a thing to my local newspaper about that as well, just trying to keep finding ways to do my part to try to spread the word to defeat these things, because, yeah, they're really nefarious. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about is kind of the biggest thing I wanted to talk about tonight, which is in recent video chats like this, and also in some of my articles, I've been talking to you about how one of the biggest things you can understand to realize why we are in this moment of authoritarianism and Trumpism is because of the lie of this country that has been going on for the entire existence of this country. It started with slavery and the genocide of Native Americans, and it's never stopped since then. All the violence and anti-equality attacks that we see today have their roots in those original attacks done by white colonists against Native Americans and against the African people that were enslaved. And just thinking about just how big of a lie this whole country has been, I've had quite a bit of hard time just on the emotional level accepting that the whole thing's a lie, because that means that it feels like, you know, a whole huge, whole huge parts of my life might be, a lot of it could be based on lies. And what I mean is, just thinking back to my time going through school, growing up with family, with my former religion, the Baha'i faith. I I was fortunate to have a lot of good times and a lot of good mentors, and I'm just trying to sort through now and see what was I not seeing when all that was going on. What am I not remembering now in my older memory, and what was going on beneath the surface. A lot of people that I knew, like in school, perhaps, that I thought were good people, maybe behind the scenes they were very bigoted, and whether and just without thinking about all the indoctrination that this society puts in all of us, what that takes from us, what how that impacted me growing up and still today too. And this is the way the memory works, but I choose to try to focus more on the good things when I go through my memories. Bad memories do come into, of course, which are rough to think about, but like losing my dad when I was 12, and every mistake I ever made. But I tend to try to focus more on the good ones, right? The good memories, because it feels more comfortable and stuff. But like I said, I'm just trying to think of, you know, even though growing up I thought, like probably like any white kid thought, you know, what was I missing? What was I not seeing that would have clued me in to say that, hey, we're still very besieged in this society by bigotry and discrimination. I mean, I fell for this lie too. I posted it on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in elementary school. I did a little book report on Martin Luther King, and I can't remember what grade I was in exactly, but it was just a short and sweet little thing talking about what the civil rights movement achieved and who Martin Luther King Jr. was. But of course, the way I worded it was that, past tense, that he helped bring us to a place where everybody is treated equally, which of course that is not the case. And so when I think of not just Martin Luther King Jr., but also Jesse Jackson, who died this week, and it's a lot to cope with, thinking that as much as the leaders of the civil rights movement did, they, what I realized is that, and they probably, I'm sure they knew this too, of course, that they were never going to finish the work in their time. That was not the goal of the civil rights movement. The goal of the civil rights movement was not the goal of the civil rights movement was not to, finish the work in 5 minutes. It was trying to bring this country closer to equality, to try to bend the moral arc of the universe. But if you read up on the history of folks like Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson, they never stopped doing the work, right up until their respective deaths. Martin Luther King Jr. in the late 60s and Jesse Jackson just the other day. There was always more to fight for, and what I've come to see is that, this whole, like I said, this America was built on a lie, which means that this whole society, the government, and this whole system of bigotry and indoctrination is this whole huge, horrifying behemoth of hate that good people like Dr. King and Jesse Jackson and other civil rights leaders have been fighting against again and again and again since the dawn of the country. And now it's on us. Now it's on our generation to continue that work. And it's on all of us to do it. It's not the one big thing I see coming out of this era is it's not any one person like a Martin Luther King Jr. It's all of us in the grassroots that are doing this work. We're the ones that we're the heroes that we've been waiting for. It's still the emotional impact of realizing that lie, the lie that, things were all fixed and that we actually were in a better place. I understand logically where we're at, how we got here, and but emotionally, it's another story. I have to, it's still a lot to think about with that. You know, culture wise, they're like if you turn on TV and stuff. When I was growing up, we had Mister Rogers and Sesame Street, and Sesame Street's still in production, and Mister Rogers is still airing in reruns, I think. Um, but I was fortunate to have those that programming available to me. That the culture was in such a way when I was growing up that I saw shows for kids like that that had pro diversity, pro quality messaging. One I have some really fond memories I have of watching PBS when I was like probably a toddler, very young. I saw it's on watching that show where I saw Maya Angelou for the first time, and I just loved her right from the start. She was always so amazing. And I also have this memory in my head of a scene of on the Sesame Street show, one of their musical segments. It was a bunch of kids playing around a drinking fountain and drinking from it. I'm pretty sure it was black kids, brown kids, white kids, kids of all kinds. In the background was playing Michael Jackson's song, the song "Rockin' Robin." So my memories of the kids playing around the drinking fountain and hearing diddly 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 tweet tweet da na 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 na. You know how that song goes. And I just remember just feeling pure joy watching that. Just seeing kids being able to have fun and everybody being kind to each other, and that song just really hit the mood too. And so there's I know which one I don't have the right terms for it, but I experienced that, and then at the same time there was stuff going on that as a kid I didn't know about, but grown-ups knew about, where all of this hatred and violence was still going on in society. Stuff that you don't know about. I mean, and I did see it from time to time as a kid too. I mean, I lived through 9/11. I was 8 years old when 9/11 happened. The other one that gets me is, I got to witness the election of Barack Obama, the first black president. I was in high school. Oh boy, I think I was a sophomore, if I remember correctly. And on the day he was inaugurated, they let us out of class. We went down the hall to another classroom. I think it was one of the social studies classrooms, and a teacher had a TV in there. I can't remember, was it one of those old rollaway TVs that they used to use? A TV on a cart, big old fat CRT cathode ray tube TV like you would use in the 80s or 90s, and it'd be strapped to the top of a cart with the VCR on the second shelf. Anyway, we went into this other classroom to watch the inauguration, and that was just a huge thing to witness. And I know it's probably something that was almost as big as kids growing up in the late around 1969 got to do that for the moon landing. They watched that during class, so they had that. I got to watch Obama's inauguration. And right now, kids are going to school. I live right up the road from the high school that I went to, and the kids going there now are going to school under authoritarianism. They're going to school, and Trump is the president. And I just I can't imagine what's going through their heads with that, and it also kind of terrifies me. And again, it's that emotional mismatch. I feel like, you live through something like Obama's election, and you grew up having a more inclusive culture on TV. I was also fortunate that, my former religion, the Baha'i faith that I was heavily involved with before I had to leave because of their anti-LGBTQ policies. Beyond LGBTQ people, they they the Baha'is do champion a message of equality of all people and the harmony of all races, ethnicities. One of their big sayings is, "We're the flowers of one garden, the leaves of one tree, and drops of one ocean." That's another one. Anyway, so I grew up with that messaging in my head too from the Baha'i faith. So that helped, I think, to counteract a lot of the white supremacist indoctrination, and probably also shielded me from a lot of the hate that was still going on too. But it didn't, immunize me completely from the indoctrination, because the indoctrination of white supremacy is just so nefarious that it gets all of us. If you're alive in this country, you've been indoctrinated. And so, at least for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, I have a hard time kind of holding two things at once. The good things I remember, like the election of Obama, and growing up with, having inclusive shows like Sesame Street and what was I, Mr. Rogers, and then at the same time now getting to this moment where we are now, this horrible moment where we have an authoritarian regime that is trying to build concentration camps. In the camps they already have, they're detaining many, many children. And I'm trying to figure out, I know logically how we got to this point. I've written to you about that before in other articles, and there's been many, many wise writers on Substack and other places that have correctly identified how we got to this moment with Trump. One of the big things, Robert Reich talks about this a lot, is the widening economic inequality. The haves and the have-nots getting so extreme that's one of the big things that led to it. So logically, I can say all of that, but emotionally, it's hard to comprehend. It's hard to comprehend, like I said, how multiple things can be true, that we can have these moments where, something like Obama's election happens, or our culture is becoming more inclusive, whether it was Sesame Street back in the day or the Bad Bunny Super Bowl concert just last week. In most of the cartoons you turn on, the cast of a lot of the cartoons that air these days, a lot of them seem to have, at least try to have, cast that are more diverse, even if the characters of color and LGBTQ characters don't have the biggest roles still yet, unfortunately. But so I guess what I'm trying to say is that part of this lie that we're unraveling is that we thought we were in a moment of better inclusion and harmony amongst the people in this country, when we really were not. And it's just a lot to cope with. It's a lot to cope with the fact that, not that any of us were wrong in trying to do what those have been trying to do what they can to put out more inclusive voice into the world, and to fight for better things, and to achieve things like the election of Obama. But the fact that we could put all those efforts through, and yet it still feels like in this moment, when I get most frustrated, I really feel like, we really have come up short here. And so, bottom line is, and I'm sure this is the case for a lot of people, especially people that are generally, like myself, those who are more hopeful, have kind hearts, and want good things for all people. It's a lot to cope with the fact that not only have we not made enough progress, but, everything we believed about this country is a lie, and everything we thought was progress is really just a false veneer, that we weren't, that the cancerous rot underneath just was not addressed, and that's what we're forced to deal with now. But so I think as I'm trying to cope with all this, it helps to sort out what is true and what is not. And this is just my opinion. Others can disagree, but this is, thinking of everything I've witnessed through my life, this is what I think here. So What is true? I think it is true that efforts have been made to try and foster diversity and inclusion, but they've never been enough. We've had more, movies in our culture, music, movies, TV shows, books have slowly but surely become more and more inclusive of various races, ethnicities, cultures. Yet, enough has not yet been done. I was listening to, and I'll have to finish it later. I was listening to a Substack live pre-recorded with Will Fullwood. Will is one of the writers on Substack that I would trust the most when it comes to learning how to be an anti-racist and dismantling the indoctrination of white supremacy. And Will was interviewing, I can't remember her name, but he was interviewing a woman. They're both, as Will would call it, they're both racialized black people, which means that they have brown skin, and because of that, society indoctrinated them in a certain way. But anyways, they both were sharing their experiences in that chat, and I'll link it to this post when I'm done recording, to my post, that is, when I'm done recording, so you guys can look at it too. But it was just it was really tough to hear about what they had been through, where you know they were pretty much tokenized in their careers, hired just to make things look diverse. But then at the first opportunity, their employers, looked for ways to get rid of them or refused to pay them, and just unbelievable that anybody would be treated that way. And that's what I'm talking about when I say that enough has not nearly been done, and so many people, particularly those who are in positions of power, have not done anywhere near enough, or just outright refusing to want to do it. And now in the White House, they have somebody who openly backs up the bigotry that they have inside. And the other big thing that I know to be true is that people of different skin colors, races, ethnicities have been getting together and forming relationships all throughout. They, even back during the 1800s, during the time of slavery, there were Will Fuller was talking about this in his video too. It was a diverse coalition that led to the successes of Harriet Tubman in the Underground Railroad. There were white allies. There was, people of all races and ethnicities that contributed to fighting back against that horrific oppression that was slavery. And I paused for a sec. I was looking back at, I still have some materials from the Baha'i Faith, and the Baha'i Faith, which was founded in 1863, the world's newest religion. It's been in America for at least as far back as 1912 around. And in this one guide I'm looking at here, there's pictures of Baha'is back, even like in the 1940s and earlier, that shows diverse crowds of people gathering for a common cause. And that's the key to it, is that the common cause that brings strong coalitions like that together is the shared values, of equality and inclusion. And that's something that within my lifetime there's been, at least I choose to believe, there has been, more people that have been embracing that. There's been, white people and people of color who have interacted with each other more, particularly like in college, when people go off to college in blue urban cities. I know in the city I live in here in western Wisconsin, it's a blue voting urban city, has a diverse array of people here. I went to school with Hmong kids, black kids, Latino kids, all sorts of different kinds of kids, and so there has been a lot of you know more bonding of people of different races and ethnicities as time has gone on. Although there's still a lot more to be done to really get people to unite, to get people of different races, ethnicities to unite, get gay and straight people, trans and cis people. We need a lot more effort to get all of us together because, as Will Fullwood also pointed out in his chat today, that you know so many people in society have been robbed of connections to people that are different from them because of white supremacy. That between black and white, or gay and straight, cis and trans, how many kinds of relationships that are necessary, have not been formed because of this stupid oppression and indoctrination. And so, that gives me hope to think about, that despite all of the oppression, there's still, communities coming together. The Baha'i Faith operates in America and around the world. And that's just one example of diverse community coming together. But, we saw in Minnesota, people rising up against ICE and successfully making the Trump administration at least appear to be reversing course. We saw in New Jersey there was this white guy that went out just last week and protested for the first time because he saw the video of a group of Latino kids running scared away from their bus stop after ICE had been targeting them. And so that's something that the Trump regime cannot stop. They can't stop us from loving each other and continuing to grow and learn more about each other. No matter what they do, they're not going to stop that. So that is another truth. Me, with my autism, I'm not great in general at reaching out to people. But I think that's something that I want to get into as well. I'm gonna before the weekend is through, I'm gonna try to set aside some time, and I'm going to prepare some ideas I can bring to my local Indivisible group, so I can try to get more involved there. Because I've been trying to get my foot in the door with that, and it seems like me just being someone that has autism, it's hard for me just to go into any social setting and jump in and say hi and introduce myself and then be able to jump right into whatever they're doing. So when it comes to me, I need to plan stuff out, and so that's one of the things I want to try to work on. I've been going to protests and stuff, but I want to see if there's other ways I can try to get involved more. Even as it's tricky to try to balance that with my day job as well. But if any of us can be doing more, we need to be doing more. That's for certainty. And getting back to what I was saying before about black and brown folks and white folks getting together more. A few weeks ago, I read an article by Zuri Stevens. She's another author on Substack I follow. She's a black woman, and I enjoy reading her perspective on everything that's going on right now. And she said a few weeks ago, I've heard this from other people, but it was important to hear it from her as well, from her perspective, that what we're seeing right now with Trump and MAGA, it is the last gasp of white supremacy, and that the statistics show that by the year 2050, 80% of people in this country are going to be some shade of brown, which will happen because more white people and black and brown people will, despite anything that the Trump regime or MAGAs will try to do, black, brown, and white people continue to find each other and, fall in love and have families, and we'll have more interracial couples and families, and America will just become more and more wonderfully diverse. So I am 32. I'm going to be 33 in a few months or so. Hopefully I'll get to live to see all of that come to fruition. If I make it to 2050, I'll be about 55 years old at that point. But I'm wary of that because my dad, my father, he died at age 54 from cancer. None of the men in either side of my family that are biologically related to me have lived all that long. Most of them died either in their 60s or maybe into their 70s. And my dad at 54 because of a terrible lymphoma cancer he had that spread all over his body. Anyway, hopefully I'll get to live to see the year 2050 in that more diverse country. I think that would be, if that can help lead us to a better future, that would be really great to see. So to wrap up this section of the chat, one thing that I think that kind of helps me to kind of cope with the moment that we're in is that, yes, I did have a lot of good teachers and good moments growing up and in my previous eras of my life, but I had all of that so that I could be prepared for this moment that we're in now. All the wise, insightful people that I've met that were my teachers and mentors that led to this moment I'm in now, and the ability that I had to live in this, like I said, this blue urban area. I went to school with a diverse array of kids. I was friends with Hmong kids growing up too, and just being able to experience that at school, and also with the Baha'i faith, what I learned about diversity there, and I got to meet people and be friends with black and brown folks and people of different race and Latino folks, people of different races of ethnicities through the Baha'i faith. That I can take all that experience and be, that makes me prepared for this moment now. Everything I learned from the past, that's why I had those experiences then, is because I'm having these experiences now under authoritarianism, and I can use what I've learned about equality. I can remember, all the mentors I had and all the people that I met, the friends that I had that were people of color that I'm no longer in touch with just because time goes by. And I can use all of that to motivate me to fight harder, and knowledge that I can use to make me a more equipped fighter. And I think that's true of all of us, that, even though the moment we're in right now is absolutely horrifying, and that the history of this entire country from the beginning has been horrifying, those of us that are in this fight, we have had good mentors and good moments in our life that have prepared us to be able to handle this moment that we're in now. And so that's what I kind of wanted to say about that. We're 33 minutes in. I don't know how much space. My iPhone has only so much space, so I don't want to record here for too long. But one other thing I wanted to mention, and I'll just go through this real quick. One other way I'm trying to make a difference and show how important it is for there to be, for humans of all kinds to interact with each other and have relationships with each other, is through my fiction work that you guys have probably been seeing. And thanks to those, I'm seeing some increased readership on that and all of my stuff. So thanks to you guys for that. The Lightkeeper series that I'm doing, which is a sort of a Goonies style series based on a group of preteen heroes. I put together with that a diverse group of friends, because in the Goonies it was mostly white boys. So I wanted to, showcase, a story like that featured a much more diverse group of kids. And so with that, I hope to be able to show that that people from different backgrounds, different lived experiences, people that are a different race or ethnicity can come together and find love and friendship, and that's stronger than the hate. And in Lightkeepers, I'm also showcasing, I've got major storylines for LGBTQ. I've got a really great queer love storyline going in that one, and I've also got a trans character in there. Hope I do that justice. So, and then I've also got my other main fiction series is Kenny Phenom, and through that I've been trying my best through that to showcase the experience, my lived experience as a high functioning autistic, and what that's like when you're growing up and going to school, and that experience I think is more and more crucial, and I'll get into that more in a minute here, but um, I've also started posting. I've got one scheduled for Saturday. I've started a new thing called Nature Journals. Some of it will be fiction, some of it will not. The one you'll see on Saturday is fiction. And I've started sort of a mini fiction series within this Nature Journals that's going to be focusing on a boy and his adult big brother who are exploring things, and they're camping out in the woods, and they're learning about life lessons at the same time. And so I thought that was a pretty cool thing to do with the goal of trying to reconnect humanity to nature. That's one thing I've learned about since coming out as LGBTQ and studying different things. Is that a big part of understanding queerness is that that's it's a part of nature, and so and then let and then I also have started. I put one of these out, and I'm working on another one, another little fiction series called The Boy in the Blue Hat. Excuse me, which is loosely based off of, well, more inspired by that boy Liam Ramos, who had been abducted by ICE, the one with the blue bunny knit cap. And so I just wanted to create these, and these, as opposed to the other fiction stuff I'm doing, this Boy in the Blue Hat, as well as the Nature Journal. They're both very, very short fiction pieces. And in it, I'm just trying to humanize immigrant kids, because what's going on right now, with these kids getting grabbed and detained by ICE is just so horrifying, and I feel like I have to keep doing stuff to tell the kids' side of the story and try to humanize them. So that's what I'm doing with The Boy in the Blue Hat. It's really a call to action to humanize immigrants. And before we go, gosh, you're closing on 40 minutes. Got to wrap up here. Okay. I wanted to address one other thing with you guys. I'm not going to say who this was. It's not any of my readers or anything like that. It's not you guys. One of these Substacks that I'm subscribed to, this particular writer has a son who has autism, a different kind of autism from mine. His son has the kind where where he has emotional and intellectual delay that basically means that although his son is an adult, that although his son is an adult, inside he's more like a 7 or 8 year old, and so he won't, and so because of that he will not be able to live on his own, and in that article, the writer was talking about how he was basically having to get custody of his own adult son and strip his son's adult rights away to do that. And I really feel for the guy about that, and I definitely empathize with him about that whole thing, and can't imagine how hard that must be. The thing that bothered me though was in the bottom of his article, he disparaged autism itself with a curse word, and several commenters on his article backed him up on it. They all kept saying "fuck autism," and to me that was horrifying to see. I mean, again, I have a very different kind of autism from this writer's son. I have high functioning autism, and so I don't understand what this person's son is going through. But at the same time, what I know about my own experience with autism and what I've learned is that autism is just a part of me. I don't know where it ends and where I begin. I would not be me without it. So, although there's many parts of it that frustrate me, Um, I would never, if if for some crazy reason it were ever an option, I would not choose to get rid of it. I would keep it because I would lose me. Um, and so I just get really, it's just really upsetting to see people say F autism, when I think instead we should be, focusing on how we can make, you know, life as good as possible for people with all different forms of autism and focus on what talents each of us autistics has. That's what I'm trying to do with the Kenny Phenom fiction series is to focus. I talk about the hard things that come with it, but I also try to focus on you know what good things can come of being someone like me. That's going to be a big focus of it as well. And I also found that there's a book. If you guys are interested, there's a book out there. It's called The Reason I Jump, and there's a documentary that's inspired on it too. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's called The Reason I Jump. All right, just pause so I can look it up. The author is, I don't know how to pronounce this, Naoki Higashida. He lives in Japan. And he wrote this book about his experience. He has a form of autism where he's nonverbal, and he has to use a computer to communicate with other people. And so he wrote this book about his experiences called The Reason I Jump, and I've read that a little bit, and I also watched. There's a documentary, of the same name that is inspired by his book, and in the documentary it just features several stories of kids with nonverbal autism, and while all of the stories are very hard, the documentary also does it. The documentary and the book also try to do a very good job of you know empowering kids with autism and showing what makes us special and unique, and celebrating our neurodiversity rather than only talking about the negative aspects. And that's what I was trying to circle back around to. I'm not the best with words here, spur of the moment. Is that you know for all of the hardship that it can cause, I believe that autism is something that is special about me, and it should be celebrated, not denigrated. And it's just my personal opinion that when you denigrate autism, if you say F autism and think of it as a problem to be solved, that opens the door for people like RFK Jr. and Trump to come in and spread all the horrible lies that they're spreading right now about people like me. So that's why I needed to say to you guys, please don't say F autism. Do not say that, please. I know there's a lot of people that really struggle with autism. I've struggled with it as well. And again, there's all sorts of different forms of it, and each person with autism has a different experience, and they struggle with it in different ways. And I know for some, especially those who are nonverbal and those who are like this one Substack writer's son who have, intellectual, emotional delay, where they're basically a 7 or 8 year old in an adult's body. I know that those experience, I can, my heart definitely goes out to anybody that has that experience. But I also just want to say that no matter what, there's nothing wrong with you. If you have autism, no matter what form you have, there's nothing wrong with you. Okay? There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with autism. It's just how we're born. Just like my sexuality. I'm pansexual, and that's part of how I was born. So and the same thing is with my disability. That's part of how I was born, and different people can have different opinions on it. But in my view, there's nothing wrong with me the way I am, and autism is something that autistic people should be celebrated. And we should not ever think that there's anything wrong with us, or that we should not ever think that we or our disability is a problem because it's who we are, and I wish more people would understand that. Okay, I need to cut this off now. We're 45 minutes in, and it's actually time for my dinner. So, before we go, I'm just going to read off this poem by Jesse Jackson. This is the one he would go around he would go around and have the kids chant this one aloud. In the article I posted about Reverend Jackson, I included a Blue Sky video at the bottom of him singing this to kids practicing this with kids on Sesame Street, and it was a really cool clip. It was a diverse group of kids. You had black and white kids sitting beside each other. That was so awesome. So here it goes. I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. I must be. I'm God's child. I must be respected and protected. I am gay, autistic, and I am beautiful. I am somebody. Soul power. I edited it a bit there. Since in the original text of it, it says I am black, and obviously I'm not black. So I decided to say that I'm, autistic and LGBTQ. And I guess I should say sometimes I say gay just as a general way to describe me. I guess I'm just used to doing that to help my mom understand my sexuality, and that's why sometimes I just, when it slips out, I say gay rather than say my actual orientation, which is more pansexual. But anywho, that was the poem. And why don't I go ahead? Let's read through it one more time here. I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. I must be. I'm God's child. I must be respected and protected. I am LGBTQ, autistic, and I am beautiful. I am somebody. Soul power. Jesse Jackson. All right. Have a good weekend, you guys. Bye.